I know you don't have a lot of time because you need to later on go to the studio, I'm guessing, correct?
No, the Canuck game, I've got to watch it on TV and then kind of cover it after the fact.
Yeah. Okay.
So I've
Perfect.
got till about 5 after.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much again, Farhan. I really appreciate this. Um, I guess first off, how have you been over the past year and a bit? How are things at home? How are things with work and everything like that?
Things are good. Yeah, for me, I don't want to say I've completely enjoyed it. I've missed the travel, but I have enjoyed spending more time at home with my family and staying more connected to them and not having those big gaps in time where I'm away.
Yeah.
It's been enjoyable from a health standpoint. I've managed to win the battle. I started running about 15 months ago
All
before
right.
COVID started. And then when COVID continued, I just kept running. I feel like Forrest Gump that way. I just kept going. So it's been good. I've managed to lose about 15 or 17 pounds or something like that
All right.
during all of that. People tend to go either one way or the other way during all of this. So I'm happy I've gone the right way. And
Nice.
different kind of working remotely. I've got a home studio. This isn't it. It's in another room, and
Yeah.
I've spent a lot of time there. My cameraman comes here a lot, and
Okay.
it could have been a lot worse.
I know well, first off, if you ever are looking for those 15 pounds, I have them over here.
Excellent.
I'll keep them for you.
Okay.
Um, but I know a
Oh,
lot of
refund.
people. Yeah. I was speaking, for example, with Nabil Kareem at ESPN
Mhm.
a few weeks ago, and he said he never left the studio in terms of he never did stuff at home. He kept on coming in. He said there's less people and so on. But it sounds like you've sort of have stayed at home and are doing things remote.
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, when hockey returned last year and they were in the bubble in Edmonton, I was there for 3 weeks.
Okay.
Took my family out there for a week of it because I've got a lot of family in Edmonton. So, it was a chance for all of them to connect.
Yeah.
So I did 3 weeks there. And then now that hockey's been going and when the Canucks play at home and when they practice at home, I do go to that
Okay.
in person. But beyond that, generally everything's been at home.
All right. Perfect. What do you think of this North Division experiment?
Board, like it was unique, at the start, and I think everybody kind of liked it. It increased some of the rivalries, like the West teams and the East teams don't have real rivalries. Certainly people, like Vancouverites don't like Toronto.
Yeah.
You get all of that, and so by extension, you don't like the Leafs, but you really don't develop it just like for the team. You just don't like the uniform,
Yeah.
and all of that kind of stuff. But in terms of the players, I think those types of rivalries between East and West have become a little bit bigger, but I think people are bored of it now. And especially since it's not really competitive, right? There's no playoff race. The three teams that are going to miss the playoffs and the four teams that are going to make the playoffs. So now it's kind of let's just get on with this and get this over with and get in the playoffs. And, certainly if you live in Vancouver, you're done with hockey.
Yeah.
And same with Calgary, two disappointing seasons in those markets. And you just, I'm sure those teams as well would like to not have to wait for the COVID extra late games here in Vancouver and just get the playoffs started. And I don't blame them at all. So I think generally it's been a bit much, too many games against those teams. We all
Yeah.
understand it's unique. We all understand that, hey, it's better than not playing and not
Yeah.
covering games and not watching games as a fan. But, it's hopefully it doesn't continue.
Fair enough. Remind me because I'm not following hockey too much these days. But so what happens in playoff time? Like the border goes away. Do the teams isolate in the states? What happens with that?
Yeah, I don't think that decision's been made, to be truthful. I know
Wow.
they're working on it, but
Okay.
I think in a perfect world, they'd love to be in a position where the American teams could come up and the teams could travel and have a normal 7-game series where you go home and you go away.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's going to be allowed. I don't know the government's going to allow it at that point, but they've got a month to get it figured out because it's going to take that long to play their internal North Division playoff first, right?
Okay. That
So,
happens first. Okay.
so at that point, you're going to have the four teams play, 1 versus 4, 2 versus 3, then the winners play. And then when that's over, I think there's a real possibility that team has got to centralize in the United States and just play there and not go back and forth. So that's not, fully confirmed. I know those Canadian teams would obviously like to have it, like to have that revisited when the time is right, but
Yeah.
they're going to need the government to sign off on not having to do a 7-day quarantine, which now you've got to do. So I don't know what the appetite is going to be in a month, or, I guess 5 or 6 weeks from now, by the time the playoffs get started, to do that.
Yeah. Which format did you prefer? Did you prefer the two bubbles of last year, or do you think what they're doing now is the better version?
Well, I mean, I think what they're doing now is more lifelike. It's more what the teams and players are used to, and it gives those players a chance to spend some time at home with their families and in their beds. So, I think that's a positive for everybody, just
Yeah.
to have that level of normalcy. The bubble was fine just to kind of get it going, but it was different, no doubt.
Yeah, absolutely. CFL
Yeah.
last year they canceled, and I don't know if I was shocked or not, but I was thinking they canceled the CFL season. Is that it for this league? Because for many years, at least in the vantage point of being in Toronto, the league seems to teeter totter on collapsing and succeeding. It seems it's a fine balance there. I know they've spoken about 2021. They're going to have a season. What are your thoughts on the CFL and how they've fared over the past year plus?
Yeah, last year was disappointing that they didn't find a way to play, and ultimately I think the league and its owners made a mistake. Look, it's not my money.
Yeah.
It's easy to spend somebody else's money, but when you look at what was lost, I think there's a bigger concern for them being the only league essentially that didn't play last year. And, there are fans that are just kind of teetering, and that was a good reason for them to cut out, right? So I don't know, I always go through this when a league strikes, that there's a certain amount of anger and apathy, but then, there's also some places where it's not really woven into the fabric of what they do. So it doesn't hurt as much, and if it doesn't hurt as much, it's easy to come back to, right? Because you weren't, you didn't feel a loss. You didn't feel that emotion. You didn't feel that anger. And, and in Canada, when a hockey team strikes or a season gets canceled, it even whets the appetite even more. Those people want to come back desperately,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I don't know what it's going to look like for the CFL when it first gets started. I mean, we do know it's not going to be full stadiums anyway. So if there is a struggle to get fan engagement and fan attendance, well, you won't notice it because they're only going to allow 25% of fans to begin with, right? So, it won't be bad from that perspective to start with. But, I think this whole XFL dialogue for the last couple of months has shown me, if nothing else, that there are CFL fans out there still. And it's got us talking about it. And so hopefully the passionate fans are even more passionate now, talking to people around the league. They feel pretty good about what their sponsorship retention levels have been like, their season ticket holder retention has been like, and all of those types of things. So, I'm curious to see what it looks like, but I think they made a mistake last year by not playing.
Wow. Really interesting. Farhan, you've been covering sports forever, it seems, even in university. Do you remember a time when you weren't covering sports?
I don't know that I can. I mean, I remember when I was in high school and I remember playing sports, but I don't necessarily remember not covering it, only because when I got to Simon Fraser, even when I wasn't working, I spent time volunteering to build up my resume. So I used to do community television. I used to do campus radio. I would write for the campus paper. Then eventually from there, I got a job at the university in the athletic department for 3 years as the sports information director. So, I was helping to promote, I wasn't necessarily covering it per se, but I was at a lot of events and writing about it to provide that information out to other members of the media and things like that. So, in that sense, I was covering it to a point. So it was certainly a part of my day-to-day life. And then from there, I got a radio job, and then I got into television at CBC, and then 2 years later at TSN. So it really has been all of my adult life. There's no question about it. I mean, since the late 80s, I've been doing it.
You've always wanted to do this?
I wouldn't say that. I think when you're younger, you want to play, right? You want to be an athlete.
Yeah,
you want
absolutely.
To be, you want to do that. And then when you realize that's not going to happen, for me, it meant a lot to stay in the game. So I've done that. And I've also been coaching, and I've had a chance to coach for as long as I've been a broadcaster, really since 1987. So I've been embedded in sports all that time. I mean, I was that kid when I was younger that I'm the guy that organized all of his friends to go play. I was the guy that organized, to play little mini leagues and to do as much of it as I could, right? I mean, I've always done it not just as a recreation. It's always been an intense passion of mine.
Yeah.
So, I think at the time when I was in university, I didn't think I would be a sportscaster. I thought I would get into some form of media relations or possibly management, or, there was a time when I thought I might get into professional coaching. There was always something like that was always going to be connected to sport. And part of the reason was because here in Vancouver, there weren't a lot of sports outlets, and those outlets that there were, we had like 3 or 4 outlets. The same people had been there forever, and it didn't look like they were going anywhere. So I just thought the opportunities would be so limited, and I didn't want to leave. So, I took another path on the media relations side, starting at SFU. And then from there, I got an opportunity, and it just kind of fell into place, and way back then, the Vancouver Grizzlies came.
That's
And that
right.
that opened up the market, and then another news station started, and another sports station started, and it's right around that time in the late '90s where everything kind of expanded a little bit, right? And I was able to get in right then, and it's changed a lot even since then. But I found the window and the opportunity, and haven't looked back.
That is nice. When I was speaking with Nabil, he talked to me about taking you to one of his classes. I think when he was
Nubble makes me feel old. Yeah,
that's his fault. I was just
he even tells me I'm the OG.
You're the OG. I think he said that on the podcast as well.
Yeah.
But he talked about how he would see you, and you were sort of like an inspiration. It was like, okay, Farhan has done it. It almost gave him permission to, okay, that means I can do that.
Yeah.
As well. I'm curious about you. Like, was there someone that you looked up to that told you, yeah, Farhan, you can do what I do?
Not really. And I say that because it wasn't necessarily what I wanted to do to begin with, right?
Yeah.
Had I done it, or had it been a goal coming out of high school that this is what I want to do, then I would have looked for that. Now, Ian Hannah-Mansing is somebody I watched, growing up, and he did show me a little bit that, yeah, okay, you can do it. Yeah. And, I remember going through it at the time when I first got started, and I thought, should I change my name? Right? Like, really? should I have a Canadian, not change it legally, but should I have a television name? Yeah. And I didn't. And, so the only thing that I did at the time was, people would say my name differently. I just wanted to make sure I said it correctly and be proud of it. Right.
Okay.
Yeah, honestly, I didn't, truthfully, I haven't experienced a lot of racism in my life. People ask me about that a lot. And, so I never felt marginalized. To be truthful, I think I got my first job in television strictly because I was a racial hire. Right. No one ever said that to me, but you could tell based on my limited experience and the job that I got in a major market, anchoring news at CBC. I certainly believe in retrospect, and probably even at the time, that my color had something to do with it. And that put a lot more pressure on, right? Because you really couldn't screw up, because if you did, then you took away opportunities for others behind you, right? Yeah. So it was really important that I succeeded when I got that opportunity. But I think Ian would probably be the only one, of color that was really obvious to me, like, of South Asian descent, that was really obvious to me. And he was in news, not in sports. So it wasn't necessarily a direct link, but he was so polished. He was really, really smooth, and he worked at CBC, and he was based in Vancouver. So I got to know him a little bit back then because that was my first job. So, yeah, I mean, like I said, if there was anybody, it was probably Ian.
I don't know if you've decided it or it just turned out. You've stayed in Vancouver. You've stayed in BC. You haven't gone across country to, I don't know, get your reps. You haven't been attracted. I live in Toronto, but whatever, you haven't been attracted by the big lights of Toronto, or even gone down to the States. Is that by design? Is that just by happenstance, or?
A bit of both. I've never wanted to, like, my thought all the time was that if I'm going to stay in Vancouver as long as I can, and I don't want to go anywhere else in Canada. Okay. I was interested in going to the States at one point. I had an agent fairly early in my career. And, and I did get some opportunities, but what I found, like, in the early 2000s is I was fast tracking at TSN, and I was getting to cover a lot of big events, and I didn't want to go back to local television, right? Like, that was not what I wanted to do. So would I have taken the leap if there was a network opportunity? I probably would have at that time, but I got offered like regional jobs in, New Jersey and Pittsburgh and a few
Okay.
things like this. And it just wasn't what I wanted to do. Now, in hindsight, would I have done it differently? Because could I have gone there, done well in a US smaller market, not the smaller market, but just a local market, even if it was in a bigger city, and tried to work my way from it to a network there? Potentially, right? But I mean, people have gone from TSN to do it. And then, I probably just didn't aggressively pursue it enough. And I'm not sure if I regret that or not. Like I look at
Okay.
Nabil, and it's funny, he calls me the OG, but I really envy him. I mean, I'm proud of him
Yeah,
for doing
yeah.
what he's doing, but I envy him, right? Because he's at ESPN and he's getting to do, when he did college football last year, I'm like, dude, that's my job. You've got my job and you're 20 years younger than me. And because I'm such a college football fan, but I'm so happy for him and I'm so proud of him. He's just an awesome kid, and not even kid. I mean, he's got 2 children himself.
Yeah.
He's just an awesome person. And I consider him a good friend. So there is part of me that wishes he would have taken that, that I would have taken that path.
Yeah.
But I didn't. But I mean, look, everything leads you to where you are, right? I mean, I met my wife and I love my wife and I love my family, and I wouldn't change that part of it for sure. So it's been good. I mean, I did get offered the opportunity to go to Toronto a couple of times, and I think there's people in Toronto that believe you should just want to go back and cover the Toronto teams. And I'm like,
Sure.
Why? Honestly, right? Like I have no desire to do that. Now, did I have a desire, like what was I interested in anchoring? I kind of always liked reporting better. Like I liked covering live events. Now,
Okay.
you can, might you make more money depending on what you get to do as an anchor? You might a little bit. It depends. But, my longevity has afforded me some good opportunities in that regard too. So I like doing the events. I mean, there's a monotony to all of it, and there's some awesomeness to all of it, right? The guys that work on the desk sometimes will tell you it feels like an office job, right? Because of the schedule, and for me, when the Canucks suck, there's a monotony to that, right? Going day after day, and nobody elsewhere in the country thinking what you do is important, right? Certainly, I've got the CFL role and the insider role, and that's all been good. And getting to cover the NFL as extensively as I have, and the Super Bowls, and all of that's been fantastic as well. So, my job is kind of morphed to. There was a time when I did everything, right? Like, I mean, I've done 5 Olympics. I used to do a bunch of golf events. NBA finals, Final Four, like I've done all of it and I've enjoyed doing all of it. But now that I've kind of been able to morph into football, hockey only, I think it's the job that I want at this time in my life and not even football, hockey, football, all things football, and just the Canucks, right? Because I'm not dying to do more Stanley Cup finals and things of that nature. I want to cover my own market that way. And then in terms of the bigger national stuff, being able to do that on the football side has been perfect. It's the right mix for me right now.
Excellent. Is there an event that you went to cover that, whether it was at the time you're covering it or as you're coming home, that you thought to yourself, well, that was kind of boring. That was a disappointment. So something it was up on a pedestal, and you came back and you go, yeah, didn't do it for me. Was there anything like that?
No, not really. I've liked it all, and I've liked it all for what it was. Like I said, the Olympics have been wonderful experiences, and but like it is work, right? I mean, and that's the thing, is that when people see you at a Super Bowl, they think, oh my God, that's amazing, and it's great, and I don't take it for granted, and I really enjoy doing it. But there is a routine to it. There is a work element to it, and I'm not the guy that I was in my late 20s, early 30s, where I went out all the time, right? I went out to all the hot spots and did all of that as well. Like, now it's, you go and you cover the event, you go back and you prepare for the next day, and you try to get some sleep, and you get up and you start it over again. And I'm not complaining at all. Believe me, I love what I do.
Yeah.
But there is a work and a grind to it. It's good and bad, right? Or not good and bad. It's good. And then it's kind of a job like everybody else has as well.
What was your?
But I wouldn't say I've been let down
at
a particular event yet.
No.
I'd have to think about that one a little longer. No one's asked me that before. That's pretty good.
What about your first big event that you had to travel to? Which one was that?
Let's see. Probably 2004 Athens. Like that year. It's funny, I hadn't done a lot of international travel earlier in my life.
Yeah.
And then 2003, that winter, like 2003, 2004, that winter, I went to Helsinki for the World Juniors.
Okay.
And so that was, my first covering it like that. And then I took my wife, then my fiance with me. And then after that, we spent about 2 weeks in Europe traveling around, which I hadn't, done before. And then from there, I went to the Olympics, and I was in Athens, and, we were there for like 3.5, 4 weeks. And that was just unbelievable for me. And then, and I had a bunch of international events right after that. Right. So, so that was good, that I hadn't done before. And it was, those were kind of eye-opening types of events. And, it's funny because then as I was doing more and more of that, I remember that in 2006, I was over in Europe for something. I was covering something. And then I was in Germany where my wife's family, she's got a lot of family there. And the World Cup was happening in Germany that year. And I was offered the assignment and I turned it down because, I had a bunch of Stanley Cup playoffs to do. And, I just was tired of being on the road, and her German family couldn't believe that I said no to covering the World Cup. And I've never been a soccer guy, but, I do wish that I'd had a chance to cover that, whether it was there and when it was in Brazil or some of those types of things. But, for the most part, it's been, I've had a chance to touch a lot of it, and it's been good.
So World Cup would be the one event you maybe would like to cover before this is all said and done?
Maybe, I don't know that I'm going to get the opportunity just because the way the job is morphed, but it's kind of the one event that I wished I had. And again, not because I'm a soccer guy, but just from a pure spectacle of it, right? I've been able to cover the spectacle of an Olympics, covering even an Olympics in your hometown is just magical. Like, it's so magical,
Yeah.
I was so proud of my city.
That's right.
But in terms of, going to a World Cup, just as that being such a global iconic event, it'd be nice to do that at some point, but nothing I'm going to beat down the doors over. Maybe I'll go one day as a fan.
Well, I was going to ask you that. What's the last event that you've been to that you haven't covered? Not including,
the Rose Bowl.
Stuff.
The Rose Bowl. Yeah, Washington and Ohio State. I'm a huge college football fan, like a college football junkie. And my son is a good fan as well. And he's a football player. And that was probably the one. Like, he and I and another friend of ours, we went down that December, and I was covering the college football playoff as well. So in between the national semifinals and the final, we went to the Rose Bowl, and I took him with me, and all the sights and sounds, and we were down there for 3 or 4 days. So that's probably the last big event. Went to a Laker game, a few things like that. So that was fun.
Nice. You talked about your son playing football. I know you still coach. Is that correct?
You know what? I have up until now, but I'm stepping down from that after 30 plus years. But yeah, wow. I've done quite a bit of it.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you a couple of questions. I know we're short on time, but let me ask you this. You've covered football for many years. You've coached for many years. Your son is now playing football. How, I guess, as a father and as a coach, how do you deal? And I know it's across all sports, but it seems that, football is the main one that has this issue and this discussion around concussions, and any long-term effects as a result of that. How do you deal with that yourself as both a coach and a father?
Well, I think as much as anything else, you have to treat them all like your children in that particular issue, right? And in many issues you do, right? Like, you develop such a closeness to them. So number one, you don't want to put them at risk. Now, the sport inherently has risks, but I also believe the sport has tremendous benefits, more so than other sports, right? In terms of, teamwork and life lessons and sacrifice and the things you're asked to do in this sport, it really is unique. And people who have played other sports will say, no, they're all like that. And I don't believe they are. So I have a real passion and love affair with the sport. So that's number one. So if you want to protect the sport and you want to protect the kids and you want to keep the kids involved in the sport, what you've got to do is you've got to educate yourself, and you've got to educate the kids, and you've got to educate the families, and you can't take people for granted, and you can't take the issue, like it's trivial, because it's not. It is an issue, right? So I think as a sport, we've done a really good job over the last 10 years to change. Now, again, it's a physical contact sport, but I was also the president of BC High School football for 3 years, and I've been on the board of directors of BC High School football for like 25 years. And so, I've tried to be a leader in these areas. And so, we would improve things like, baseline testing and the standard of medical care you want to make sure all the kids have and the resources they have. So change the way you practice. When I played high school football, we practice in full pads and we used to hit full contact every day, right until the game, right? Like we would go hard for 4 days and then play in the game. Well, now we don't do that anymore, right? So, you've got contact limits. You change the way you teach tackling, and you try to change the culture of the game because, I remember when I grew up, there was gratuitous hits, right? Like you would blindside people and, you would intentionally try to go helmet to helmet. And, you watch all those old videos and the NFL film stuff, and you would really glorify the gratuitous hits.
Mhm.
And so the culture has also needed a shift. And you can see it when you watch NFL games, as violent as it is. There's a moment in a game where a player is vulnerable and someone's got a chance to really injure him and they don't, right? They just tackle them. And it shows you that the culture is changing a little bit. So, some people might view me as an apologist, or that, we just shouldn't have football because it's too tough, or we shouldn't have hockey because it's too tough. But they're wrong, right? It's a beautiful game. Hockey's a wonderful game. I think there's a real value to contact sports, because you challenge yourself physically and it breaks down a lot of emotional and mental barriers when you're able to overcome some physical fears. There's a lot to it that I think the kids benefit by. So don't dismiss the issue. Don't sweep it under the rug. Take it seriously. Do everything you can to put protections around and education around it, and then move forward and do the best you can. And, certainly from my son's perspective, I take it real seriously. If he's got even anything remote that makes me worry, like I pull him out for an extended period of time, but I treat other kids the same way, right? So I want to be able to look the kid in the eye down the road and the parent in the eye. There was one kid that I wish I'd done a better job of it. I regret it. There was one kid that he really wanted to come back and play, and he just wanted to keep playing. And I convinced myself that it was okay, and
Wow.
the mom wanted him to play and the doctors would clear him. And deep down, I just had a sick feeling in my stomach that we just shouldn't allow him to play. But then the other side of me is like, God, it's his dream and he loves it so much. Don't take it away from him. The doctors have said yes. And I knew in my heart that I made the wrong decision. And it was about 10 years ago. And, he eventually had to give it up. And the last 2 times he came back, I had such regret over that I was never going to let that happen again.
Wow. Why is this the right time for you to step away from coaching?
Just because my kids are getting to that age, and I've never wanted to really admit that it came at a cost, and it does. And they need me now, and I need change in my life right now. So it's been such an anchor, and I say that in a positive way, like a stability piece in my life. But it does come at a cost. And my son's we always thought that he would play for me, and I've coached him in youth football, and we thought we would do that through high school, but he's got some bigger aspirations, and I want to help facilitate that and
Nice.
and help him with his dreams. And it's the right move for my entire family for me to step away and for us to do some different things, and we're all really excited about it.
That is awesome. That's good news. I'm going to keep my eyes and ears open for a Lalji on
There you go.
on the field. That is awesome. Farhan, thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it. All the best with everything that you're doing.
Kerm, thanks for having me.